Rivers don't give up their secrets easily. They hold them, tangle them in reeds, press them into silt, sweep them downstream with the rest of the wreckage. But on April 2nd, 1988, 8 days after Lisa Marie Kimmell disappeared, the North Platte River gave something back. Not a clue, not a sign, a body. Lisa had been found, nude, weighed down, floating in the icy current near the old bridge in Casper, Wyoming. What followed wasn't just heartbreak, it was horror. The autopsy would confirm what her family already feared. Lisa had been assaulted. She had suffered severe head trauma. She'd been held alive for days. And then she'd been killed. This episode isn't easy. We'll be walking through the discovery of Lisa's body, the recovery, the evidence, and what little forensics could tell us in 1988. We'll also examine what couldn't be answered back then and what haunted investigators for years. And we'll talk about the detail that's stuck in the minds of everyone who saw the coverage. And we'll talk about the detail that's stuck in the minds of everyone who saw the coverage. Her car, gone. But not just any car, the black Honda CRX with the personalized plate, Lil Miss. A nickname, a symbol, and eventually a calling card that would become infamous. Lisa's body had been found, but the man who took her, he was still out there. And the fear that followed wasn't just for Lisa. It was for every young woman who drove that same road. Hey, Angela. How's it going tonight?
Better than last night. How are you?
Yeah, better than last night?
Yeah, I don't have quite the headache I had last night.
That's really great news. I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. No complaints whatsoever.
That's great.
Yeah. So you ready?
Not sound at all.
No?
That didn't sound like I meant that at all. That's great.
Well, good for you.
It arose. No, I meant it. It just did not come out that way.
That's all right. So, we ready for this episode?
I'm gonna be, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of say the same thing every time. It's tough. I mean, the job that we do, talk about true crime, is just tough.
It is.
But, you know, we'd hope that she'd just been delayed, that maybe she'd gotten turned around, maybe her car broke down, maybe she'd walk in the door, but Rivers don't give back the missing. They give back the truth. And on April 2nd, 88, the North Platte told us everything that we didn't want to hear.
Yeah, Lisa had been found, nude, submerged, tied down with a heavy object, and left in the current like she didn't matter. But she mattered. And what the autopsy revealed, it broke something wide open.
Yeah, this wasn't just a murder. This was prolonged, personal, cruel. And for the first time, law enforcement had to face the truth. Someone had taken her, held her, hurt her, and they weren't finished hiding.
This is Dark Dialogue, Rocky Mountain Reckoning, the series where we return to the crimes rooted deep in the dirt and snow of the American West. The ones that never left the hearts of the people who lived through them.
We investigate the stories buried under the snowfall, prairie dust, and decades of unanswered questions. The one whispered through cattle fences, past broken barbed wire, and across wind-lashed highways.
Disappearance isn't always about getting lost. Sometimes, someone's waiting.
I'm your host, John.
And I'm Angela.
In this episode, we walk through the moment that Lisa was found, what the forensics showed, what the limitations were in 1988, and why one detail, the license plate that read Lil Miss, burned itself into the minds of an entire region.
We'll also talk about how the media covered the case and how fears spread like smoke across Wyoming. because Lisa was one of us. And if it could happen to her...
Yeah. This is episode 2, What the River Gave Back.
And this is Dark Dialogue, Rocky Mountain Reckoning.
Because I completely and totally dropped the ball before the last episode, I believe that you have a bunch of location information for us for this second episode, right?
A bunch.
I kind of figured.
You're the one that dropped the ball because I didn't realize I wasn't asked location stuff.
That's all right. I'll take the blame. But with that, why don't you tell us about some of the places that we're going to be talking about this episode and really throughout this whole arc of Lisa Marie Kimmell?
Okay, so it's going to be a lot of me for a minute.
Perfect.
Because we have a few places to talk about.
Well, I do most of the gabbing anyway, so I can share that.
Sit back for a minute.
Yeah, take it away.
He's just going to rest. You know? Don't
Exactly.
nap and we'll be fine.
Yeah, wake me up when you're done.
We gotta throw something at it. Got it. So the first location is Billings. We've talked a bit about Billings, Montana in previous episodes, as it is one of the major cities folks in our area venture to for major medical specialties, because Billings hosts the largest hospitals within a 500-mile radius. Many of us also seek the larger array of shopping and dining options as well as entertainment, with the Metro Park Arena and the Alberta Bear Theater hosting concerts and shows. There's also many museums and lots of cool stuff to do around Billings.
I've never ever been to a museum in Billings.
The Moss Museum is something I want to go to. I don't know a whole lot about it. So,
The Moss Mansion?
yeah, thank you very much. So, see, you knew something.
Oh, yeah, I knew something. I mean, I've seen the Moss Mansion, but I've never been in it. I don't think I've ever gone to a museum in Billings.
I kind of want to. So, anyway, the city was founded in 1882 and named for Frederick H. Billings, a former president of the Northern Pacific Railroad. The railroad formed the city as a western railhead for its further westward expansion. At first, the new town had only 3 buildings, but within just a few months, it had grown to over 2,000.
Wow.
Right? So this is what spurred Billings' nickname of the Magic City. Because like magic, it seemed to appear overnight.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either. I knew it was Magic City, but I didn't know why.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Whoever asks.
Yeah. Huh?
We just
Interesting.
agree with it and move on.
Yep.
We're very accepting people.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Magic City, sure. Currently, Billings is the most populous city in Montana, with the census statistics trending as follows. A whopping 145 people were reported in 1870. 145 people.
Wow.
Just wait. 12 years later, before it was officially founded, 12 years before it was officially founded, that's I messed my whole self up. That's when 145 people were reported. Well, the story that takes place that we're discussing is in 88. We have to look at 1990 census reporting 81,151 residents. And in 2020, it reported 117,116 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of blew up a little bit. So there's definitely something to that magical growth people are talking about. Well, many notable people are from Billings. I just grabbed a few that caught my eye while reading about it. Calamity Jane lived in and around Billings between stints with the Buffalo Bill Wild West show. John Liver Eaton Johnson was connected to Billings because he served as a lawman in the area. Did you know that?
I did. Do you know why he's called Liver Eaton Johnson?
So maybe he ate livers.
Because the story goes that I think it was the crow killed his family, so he went and hunted the crow down and killed them and ate their livers. Yep. And he is currently buried where?
In Old Trail Town?
In Old Trail Town.
That was Jeremiah. Is it the same person?
Same person.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was actually dug up. He was buried in California. He was dug up, moved here, and Robert Redford, because he played him in the movie.
Tested my knowledge.
And you're kicking ass. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Astronaut Frank Borman, who commanded Apollo 8's historic Christmas flight in 1968, retired to Billings and passed away there at the age of 95. Academy Award nominee and famed Pixar animator Bud Luckey was born and raised in Billings. And finally, I'll mention American rock and roll performer Robert Lee Chan Romero, best known for his 1959 song, Hippie Hippie Shake.
I did not know that he was
born and raised in Billings.
That's pretty cool.
So some not so fun facts about Billings that I just decided to throw in there was that in the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, that left about 1 inch of ash on Billings soil.
Yeah, nickel too.
Yeah, hair too. While the 1988 fires in Yellowstone National Park blanketed Billings in smoke for weeks.
And worse here.
And worse.
I remember that one quite well.
And more recent-ish, you might remember it. I don't know. Were you here in 2010?
Yeah, I was, and I do actually remember that.
Father's Day, June 20th, 2010, a tornado touched down in the area of Billings known as the Heights and did significant damage to many businesses, including the Metro Park.
Including Metro Park?
Yeah.
Yep.
That was a little frightening for some of us who were like, tornadoes don't belong here. Yeah, I was not a happy girl. I was very mad.
I've seen several tornadoes here.
See, I've not.
5, I think.
I don't want to. And I was very, very upset that it was that close.
Yeah, I've been a lot closer.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't want to. So now we'll run you down to Denver. And during the Pikes Peak Gold Rush in the summer of 1858, a group of gold prospectors from Lawrence, Kansas, established a mining town near the South Platte River. This was the first historical settlement in what eventually became the city of Denver. While it was officially named after James W. Denver, the governor of the Kansas Territory at the time, it was later nicknamed the Mile High City because its official elevation is exactly 1 mile above sea level.
Yep.
I figured he would correct me if that was wrong.
That is 100% true. And it's hilarious because everybody talks about it like it's so high. And it's like, yeah, there's about a million different freaking places in Wyoming and Colorado that are higher.
1 mile. Denver is the most populous city in Colorado and is the 19th most populous in the United States. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And it is freaking booming. So it will... I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see it take over like Chicago and Houston. And
right.
I mean, the Front Range of Colorado is just booming.
Yeah. I've been there a time or 6, but.
Yeah, me too.
So, so this will lead me into the census records again. I get to do so many census records this episode.
You know, the other thing before you get to the census records is it's kind of funny, but although Billings is one of the places that we can go for some concerts and stuff, as hard as it is to believe, Denver is the place where everybody from Wyoming and Montana and every place goes for like the major concerts because...
And all of the sports.
It is the one place in this entire northwestern, short of like when you get far west, like Seattle and Portland and stuff. But I mean, there's nothing really in Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas. I mean, it's all Denver.
All converged.
Yep.
So, 4,749 people were reported to live there in 1860. Well, nearer to the time of this story, they reported 467,610 people.
And the crazy part is that's just like, like every major city, that's just like Denver proper. But then there's all of the suburbs around there. Well over 1 million people. I mean, yeah, probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 million just in that, Denver, Aurora, Littleton, that whole area. Yeah.
So another tiny jump, it's tiny, In 2024, an estimated 729,029 Denverites.
Yeah.
I'm really big on the demonyms now.
I noticed that.
Yeah. In fact, the people in my office always want me to ask or to find out what the demonym of something. So it's no secret that Denver is known for a ton of sports. Denver Broncos, Colorado Rockies, Denver Nuggets, and the Colorado Avalanche. This leaves a list of notable people that would keep us here till Friday if I read them all. So I'm not going to. I did what I do, and I just picked out a few, and apparently I write now.
I'm impressed.
So, comedian actor Tim Allen was born in Denver and spent his childhood there.
I didn't know that.
I did not know that because he's all about Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he was born there and had childhood there. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Zon McLaren, that's known as Matthias on Longmire.
Matthias
on Longmire.
Yeah.
And our favorite sitcom maid, Alice, Ms. Ann B. Davis, spent a decade there in the 70s. Which I was shocked because weren't they recording the Brady Bunch in the 70s?
Yeah.
So she was bouncing back and forth between Denver and...
Probably.
Anyway.
I mean, Denver's a major airline hub.
True, yeah, it is. Wyoming Senator, the late, great Alan K. Simpson, was born there. And in 1957, the 64th U.S. Secretary of State, Ms. Madeleine Albright, became a U.S. citizen in Denver. Didn't know that either. Denver also brought us bands such as The Fray, One Republic, and the Lumineers.
Who else lived there? Right around 1860. Actually, it would have been a little bit later. It would have been more like 1864.
Wasn't me.
Billy the Kid.
Billy the Kid. Yeah, John's going to have some Billy the Kid information for us soon.
Oh, yes, I am.
So, we will bring you north a little bit to our little slice of heaven, Cody, Wyoming. Was founded in 1896 and incorporated in 1901. It is widely known that Cody was founded and named for William F. Buffalo Bill Cody. In 1870s, Buffalo Bill was impressed by the region's potential for irrigation and development, so in the 1890s, he returned, partnered with investors, and founded the town. Cody is the county seat of Park County, Wyoming, and is a beautiful 52 miles from the east entrance to Yellowstone National Park. Please forgive me, my tourism marketing day job is showing through.
A little bit.
Very well known as a tourist destination, there are several museums to enjoy the Cody Night Rodeo, running every night from June 1st to August 31st, weather permitting, earns Cody the title of Rodeo Capital of the World.
And that weather permitting thing is a new development, because when I was growing up, it was not weather permitting. Nope. It was rain or sleet or hell or tornadoes. It didn't matter.
It still has to be
pretty bad.
Lightning
is the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit in that buzzard through some lightning.
There are a lot of times, and it's friggin' scary. You're on this giant metal. Everything's metal.
Yeah. With, 60, 70 other people going, we're all dying together.
Yeah.
Cody's earliest census reported 1,132 people in 1910 and grew to 7,897 people in the 1990 census, just 2 years after this story takes place. The 2023 estimate is approximately 10,240. So, besides your two favorite podcast hosts, Dark Dialogue Zone, John and Angela, a few other potentially more well-known folks were born in Cody. Namely, Grammy-nominated country music artist and professional rodeo champion.
He wasn't from Cody.
It said he was born in Cody.
I don't think so.
I looked in 3 places. Born in Cody.
I'm going to have to check that because I'm pretty sure he wasn't born in Wyoming.
Anyway.
But he did live in KC.
Supposedly then, Chris Ledoux was born in Wyoming, according to 3 places on that. And the internet doesn't lie.
Oh, yeah, this is true.
We discussed this last night.
Yes, this is true. I'm sorry.
Abstract expressionist artist Jackson Pollock.
Really?
Yes, he was born here.
I did not know that.
Yes. And former Denver Bronco linebacker John Wending.
I don't know who that
What
is.
do you mean? I think he was born in the 80s. So
younger than me.
yeah, I don't know how long he was the linebacker, but
Because I'm not the big sports guy either.
this is true.
Like I was working on this NFL guy's house, and they're like, "You don't know who that is?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't know who it is. Who the hell? Why do I care?" I mean, one time I was working on a place, and John Elway showed up. I did recognize him, but
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I'm going to tell him my brother, when he was in the military, he was stuck in the airport in Alabama somewhere, or maybe it was Atlanta. I can't remember. And sat and had like an hour-long conversation with MC Hammer. No idea who he was talking to. No.
And that's a crazy thing about Cody too, is we get famous people here all the freaking time. Like
Schwarzenegger buys boots here. He's walking down Main Street. People are
oh yeah, James Hetfield's here all the time.
Stone Cold Steve Austin's been here a handful of times.
Kevin Costner was apparently just here. I saw somebody took pictures of him with him on Main Street just like a month ago or something like that. I mean, it's all the time.
I can say it now. Matthew McConaughey was here a couple weeks ago doing some commercials.
Yeah, it's Cody's. I mean, there's a lot of famous people that end up here.
Oh, yeah.
Kenya Tucker was here.
Oh yeah, that's
partying her ass off.
Assy.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll wrap up this little trip to Cody by mentioning that it was voted 2023's best Western small town by USA Today.
It's a pretty great town.
I like it.
Pretty happy to live here.
Me too. The final tiniest place ever
yeah.
I will mention is Moneta, Wyoming. And Moneta is so small that I actually cannot believe it's even on the map. When looking for population information of any kind, I was met with the following quote. Moneta, Wyoming has no official or publicly available population data because it is a former village, not an incorporated municipality, and its status as a former village means it is not tracked by the U.S. Census as a distinct population center, end quote.
Yeah, and I bet there's nobody famous from there.
Oh, yeah. Well, one.
Well,
famous.
Infamous.
Yeah. Another quote I found that I will share is this. Named for a town in Iowa and established in 1906 as a railway stop in the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad line. While historically it was a small town with stores, a hotel, and sheep shearing facilities, today it is a sparse area with a few businesses and is near the location of the Moneta Divide natural gas and oil development project. It's notable for being close to the geographic center of Wyoming and is located on U.S. Route 26, about 20 miles east of Shoshone, Wyoming. Post office was opened in 1906 and closed in 1972. And the only real significance it has to us is the very sad and disturbing relation it has with this case.
Yeah. And, I got to say, I don't know of any businesses there. It must be just like home businesses or like guys that have their own welding truck or something like that, because there sure as shit is no stores or anything there.
Yeah, well, they don't have a post office anymore since even before you and I were both born.
No, it's literally
nothing.
A dot on a map. There's like
how is it
4 trailer houses off the side of the road. That's it.
How is it even allowed to be on the map?
I don't know.
But anyway, that's enough of my constant.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The water moved slow that morning. It was April 2nd, 1988, just after dawn, when a driver noticed something strange along the North Platte River near the old bridge on the outskirts of Casper. He pulled over, walked to the edge, and saw something pale tangled in the reeds. Not a branch, not debris, something human. Lisa had been missing for over a week, and now she had surfaced, not by choice, not by miracle, but because the river couldn't hold her any longer. Her body was found nude, bound with rope and a heavy object. The spring thaw had dislodged her, And for the first time in her disappearance, the silence had broken. This is where hope ends, and where the questions begin. So, the last time we kind of went through, Lisa's whole story. She's living down in Denver, Aurora area with her mom, and they're commuting back and forth, from Aurora to Billings pretty much every weekend. And then, just a reminder, her mom had a ski trip scheduled for that weekend. So she flew home. Lisa was going to drive from Denver to Cody, where she was going to meet up with her relatively new boyfriend, Ed Jarosh, and then they were going to stay the night, and then they were going to get up and head up to Billings for the Easter weekend, and she was going to introduce him to her family and all the Easter festivities and all that kind of stuff. And then she was pulled over just outside of Douglas for speeding, taken to Douglas, couldn't get money from the ATM, and so the officer let her go about her way, and that was the last confirmed sighting of her. And then she just disappeared. And so then nothing. There was literally nothing. And then on April 2nd, 88, which was 8 days after she had disappeared, that's when her body was found in the river in Casper. And so the time of day that her body was discovered was listed as early afternoon, and it was in the North Platte River in Casper, and her body was floating face down in a clump of weeds approximately a quarter mile downstream from the old government bridge. And I think during the last episode, you pulled up a picture of the government bridge, and so anybody that's curious, it's easy to find a picture of it on the internet. And so the old government bridge is an old trestle bridge, and it's not really heavily used, but it is believed to be the murder and the disposal site for Lisa. And then, like I said, it's kind of in Casper, and Casper has grown so much since 88 that it's even more in Casper, and she was discovered by a local fisherman by the name of Greg Bradford from Casper. And so I heard it reported that it was him, and then I heard it reported there were two fishermen, one like walking, or I don't know, it wasn't exactly clear, and the only name that I could find was Greg Bradford. But it was noted that one of them was from Billings, Montana. So maybe it was him and a buddy or something like that. But they obviously notified authorities immediately, and they got there and they discovered her partially nude body. She was pretty much only had her socks on. And that was pretty much it. She was floating, like I said, face down, and no significant decomposition whatsoever, which kind of struck them. I mean, it was pretty cold still. And, for those that aren't from Wyoming, it might sound a little bit odd, but April 2nd can be damn cold still in Wyoming. And so
May can be cold.
Yeah, I mean, I've sat and watched the 4th of July parade in a snowstorm more than once. So
love that, Trig.
Yeah, it's very much true. So there was signs of, she was bound with ropes and cords. There was evidence of beating. She had bruises, blunt force trauma, and stab wounds, multiple stab wounds to her chest and abdomen. And her body showed signs of sexual assault, and then obviously being dumped into the river from the bridge. And so, like I do, we're going to be discussing the autopsy findings. So if that's sensitive to you or whatever, then fast forward a little bit to jump past this, because it's always brutal talking about this kind of shit, so. But the autopsy was conducted by the Natrona County coroner, James Thorpen, and he determined that the cause of death was a combination of blunt force trauma to the head, which would have been fatal within minutes, and 6 stab wounds to the chest and the abdomen, which were arranged in a unique circular pattern. Her time of death was estimated to be around March 31st to April 1st. And that means that she was killed just hours before her body was found in the river, which also means that she would have been held captive for approximately 6 to 7 days after her abduction.
So still around somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Found her.
Yep. Additional details are that she was severely beaten. She was bound during her captivity. She was raped repeatedly. There was seminal fluid evidence that was collected from her body. No defensive wounds were noted. But then in other reports, I wasn't able to find the actual autopsy report. So some of them said there was no defensive wounds and others reported defensive wounds. I suspect with the length of captivity that she likely had some defensive wounds and other wounds that were, part of that for sure.
Some was probably covered up by the beatings and...
Right. Yes. The toxicology report was clear. There was no drugs or alcohol that were found in her body at all. So obviously, once they find the body, the immediate response was to get the body out of the water. And this fell into the jurisdiction of the Natrona County Sheriff's Office and the Wyoming Highway Patrol. She was quickly identified as the missing Lisa Marie Kimmell. And, there was a few reasons for that. One, it was a huge story. It went everywhere almost instantly. And Wyoming just didn't have a lot of missing people. And so we have, during this period of time, we essentially have one girl that matches this description that's missing from this area. So it made it pretty quick for them to be able to determine who it likely was. And then they used dental records and matched it to the missing persons case and confirmed that it definitely was Lisa Marie Kimmell. And then sadly, her parents Ron and Sheila were informed on that same day. And Sheila would later say, in her book, which she wrote called The Murder of Lil Miss, as the worst possible nightmare, which I can only imagine. And then, like I said, news spread rapidly. It was freaking everywhere almost immediately. And, a lot of that comes back to that license plate. And we're going to mention it time and time and time again. That Lil Miss license plate, I think it really played well with the press. And so this story was picked up everywhere, even nationally, right away. So the evidence showed that the body location indicated that it was dumped from upstream, and there was no vehicle or any personals that were found nearby. So investigators went up onto the old government bridge, and they found a pool of blood, which they confirmed to be Lisa's on the bridge. And there were also signs of a struggle. And so they pretty quickly determined that the murder happened on the bridge. So they figured that she was taken out of the vehicle on the bridge and was bludgeoned and stabbed right on the bridge and then thrown over the bridge at some point.
With no witnesses.
Yeah, with no witnesses, but if this happened in the middle of the night or, early morning, it doesn't really surprise me. Initially it was reported that there was a strange car on the bridge, possibly her own car on the bridge, March 26th of 88, which would have been the day after she went missing. And so originally there was this belief that she was killed almost immediately, about 5 hours after she received that speeding ticket. But later the autopsy confirmed that she had not been dead that long. And so there was conflicting witness sightings of Lisa's car after that, literally hundreds. And I remember this so clearly during the period of time that she was missing, from March 25th to April the 2nd, there were sightings of her car everywhere. I mean, I can remember them reporting sightings in like Washington and all over Montana and Wyoming, and it's a strange how that happens, because her license plate was so distinct. It wasn't just that it was the Honda that they were reporting. They were reporting this car with these license plates. And so I don't know if it was people just making shit up or what it was, but it was strange. And I remember it happening.
It's amazing how far and how fast people want you to believe a car has gotten.
Exactly. Yes. And so, like I said, the lead agencies in this case were the Natrona County Sheriff's Office, the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation, and then the FBI was involved later, and so was the DEA, which I'm not entirely clear on exactly why that is, and we'll be diving into that a little deeper in later episodes.
Enforcement agency?
Yeah, or at least one of the investigators was DEA, because he's one of the ones that I actually tried to reach out to and contact, but unfortunately he's deceased now. But he was certain that her killer was a serial killer with multiple other victims, and I believe that he was dead on with that. And then after the body was found, there were extensive searches for that black 88 Honda CRX with those distinct Little Miss license plates. I mean, there were air searches. I can remember as a kid just watching for this car as we were driving around. Like I said, I was like 11, so I wasn't driving, but I can remember like being driven to school and stuff, and I'm looking for this car, and
John's gonna find her.
Yes, I can remember that very clearly, and I certainly wasn't alone, because it was like this entire area was searching for this car, and it didn't stop once her body was found. I mean, it continued, and as we'll be talking about, it's a long time before we find that car.
I remember hush talks about it, but I was still young enough that
you would have still been pretty young. So
I was, I'm 2 years, I was like 9. So it would have been like hush talks, like they think we can't hear.
Right.
But man, definitely not as deep as you were.
Yeah, I can remember like talking with my buddies at school about this and stuff. Like, it was huge, but there's a world of difference between like an 8 or 9 year old and an 11, 12-year-old when it comes to, kind of knowing what's going on in the greater world around you. It's just like and so,
and being worried about it. I wasn't as worried about it as you would.
Right. Yep. And then too, like I said, I had older siblings that were like her age. Mm-hmm. And so I think it affected me more too because of that. It just, I don't know, this case just really hit me hard as a little kid. I remember so vividly all of this. And then, several witnesses came forward. They gave composite sketches of more than 17 men from different sightings, but there was no official release due to the inconsistencies, because they ranged like all over the freaking place. Like a guy that's 250 pounds with a beard, and a young guy that's 150 pounds and no hair. I mean, obviously those aren't exactly it, but it was like completely different descriptions. And, later we'll know why, and that is because nobody saw this happen. So, spoiler alert, the case is going to remain unsolved for 14 years until 2002, when there's a DNA match to a particular piece of shit. But discussing the initial investigation, it reveals a case that is marked by resource constraints, considerable procedural challenges, and confusion stemming from numerous unconfirmed leads and community frustration. And I will say that this is a case where I think the public help almost hindered the investigation more than it helped it, because this case just went like wildfire all over the freaking place. There were so many tips that were called in, and the officers, of course, they got to search down every one of these tips. They got to investigate every one of these tips. And so their resources are really strained by trying to do that. And so we know that their early actions focused on what happened after Lisa was last seen at that speeding stop near Douglas, and her disappearance was reported quickly to law enforcement in multiple different states, and the focus was on broad searches for that car, like I said. And early on, investigators theorized that the killer was likely local, as evidence indicated that Lisa was murdered and deposited off of the government bridge, which wasn't really commonly used and was a little bit of a hard-to-access location. And, the blood that was found on the bridge supported this theory, and local law enforcement initially believed that she was killed within hours of that speeding ticket, like I said. And then witnesses claimed that they saw her car. Sometimes they saw Lisa as well, all across various Wyoming towns, the neighboring states, like I said, even after her presumed death. And that further complicates the timeline and the focus of the search. And some of these sightings were considered very reliable at the time, such as the alleged appearances of Lisa and her car in both Buffalo and in Casper, Wyoming, hours or even a few days after her last confirmed sighting, but before her body was found. But none of these could ever be substantiated as being Lisa. And we know now that it's almost certain that it was not. But the investigation was flooded with over 300 tips about the Little Miss license plate and Lisa's car, which, like I said, drained the resources, diverted attention from potential stronger leads, and multiple similar cars caused a lot of confusion. It was a relatively popular car, maybe not in Wyoming, but in this whole western region, it was a pretty damn popular car.
Prestige plates back then
were rare,
yeah.
And obviously Montana had them. Wyoming didn't have them back then, I don't believe. We didn't have enough numbers in our license plates, seriously, to have them. But I remember I always thought it was really cool because Montana did, because they had all the numbers in their license plates, which...
That's why they added another space this year.
To the license plates?
Wyoming.
Yeah. But so we had multiple similar cars all over the freaking place. And even though some of those drivers volunteered their records to clear up any confusion, which distinguish her cars from others and all that kind of stuff, all of that takes time and all of that takes resources. And so, Casper and Natrona County, it's one of the larger departments in the state of Wyoming, sure, but it's still tiny compared to, large city investigative forces. I mean, it really strained their resources. And then, the investigators faced this vast geographic challenge with limited manpower, and Wyoming and Montana's large sizes. Both of these are big damn states with very sparse law enforcement. And you can say that for both Wyoming and Montana. Montana is really no different, with the exception of a few of the large cities, like the one you talked about, Billings being the largest, which, even like Wyoming, the largest city in Montana is not very big.
Yeah.
In comparison, and the vast majority of the towns are tiny all across both of these states. So we have huge areas with very little law enforcement. So that meant that physical searches were slow and interagency coordination was definitely hampered. And then we're talking still 1988. So this wasn't, 2025. So a lot of them still had manual record keeping, poor communication technology, which was prevalent all throughout the 80s, and especially in smaller departments. As it just happens, your larger departments get the fancy stuff right away, but it's hard for small departments to justify the expense of a lot of that stuff. And that's kind of what we were faced with at this period. And, to be perfectly honest, it's what we're still faced with now, and what we'll always be faced with is there's just not enough tax revenue when you have no population to support huge expenditures for all the fancy gadgets, We had the physical evidence, such as Lisa's rape kit, was not actionable for years due to the state of DNA technology in 1988. It was, we had it, we knew about it, but it was so freaking limited in 88. Like, you were just kind of starting to hear some talk about this weird DNA thing that people, I can remember when you started hearing about it, and it was so mystical and confusing, and
Mystical.
It really was. It was like this magic thing inside you that tells everybody's different, like, what?
Who you are?
This is crazy. This is crazy science fiction talk.
Yep.
And so, there were a lot of, it was witchcraft. There were a lot of family-driven searches because of the limited state resources. Much of the searching for Lisa's car was supported by the family and by community volunteers with aerial searches, and they did like fundraisers and stuff to fill the gaps, to pay for the searching and stuff. And her family was extremely active, which, is usually the case. But, I just remember, I remember so many, they were on the news all the time talking about this, and they really worked to keep her story in the front of people's minds, with her mom even writing a book about it, which is pretty huge.
How hard that was.
Oh, it had to be extremely difficult. Officers from both Montana and Wyoming expressed difficulty keeping up with the volume of tips and the distances involved between those tips. You have somebody, say, in Missoula, Montana, report that they saw Lisa's car, and then you have somebody in Rawlins, Wyoming report that, and so you're literally 1,000 miles apart. As crazy as it seems, that's what was going on. Or, like I said, I remember reports in Washington State and, southern Wyoming and stuff like that. So you're talking huge distances with very small departments. And then a lack of specialized investigative and forensic resources in those rural areas left significant investigative gaps, particularly regarding any kind of advanced forensic processing. And this is in no way their fault at all. It just was the nature of the beast, And luckily, we've come to a place where DNA testing has become relatively inexpensive in comparison to what it was in the late 80s and early 90s. But, back then, it wasn't at all crazy for DNA testing to cost $10,000 to $20,000. And that was in 1988 or 1990 money.
It'd take months.
And take months, yes. And so, and then there was the lack of any integrated state and national missing persons or forensic databases, which meant that crucial information sharing was slow and sometimes arriving too late to be useful for any police field efforts. This was back in the time, this was before NamUs. NamUs wasn't around back then either. So there was really nothing. So literally, you would get a call that says, I saw her car in Green River 2 weeks ago. And you're like, oh, well, great, thanks. But
2 weeks ago.
Sorry, our DeLorean's broken currently. So, and that's just really what happened. And so there was a lot of community frustration, which was centered on law enforcement's inability to find Lisa's car for years, despite, that very memorable Little Miss license plate. And then, we're going to discover that the car is found buried on douchebag's property years later. Yeah. And so, and I really hope that all the people that were attacking the police were paying attention when that car was found, because it's pretty much impossible to find that car when it's buried in the ground.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever even heard of that shit before. I think this is the one case. I'm not saying it's the only case that's ever happened.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's the only case that I think I've ever heard of where a car,
The entire car,
is buried.
Yeah.
Dumped in rivers, dumped in lakes, dumped in caves and holes in the ground, set on fire. I've heard all of that, but somebody actually burying an entire intact car? Like I said, I'm sure I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of every true crime case ever, but all of them I've researched, I've never heard of that shit before. This one definitely stands out. And, you know, I mean, honestly, a lot of that goes to just how remote Moneta, Wyoming is, because you can have somebody out there with a backhoe digging a freaking hole big enough to bury a car in and not raise suspicions. And then there was public mistrust. There was conflicting information surrounding sightings, unsuccessful ground and aerial searches, and divergent investigative theories, which created public and family mistrust. The community was often more active and organized in searching than law enforcement agencies that were tasked with the case. And so to kind of sum up the investigative challenges, we have more than 300 sightings, most of them unverified and all of them being false, but those wasted resources and led investigations astray. We had the search for the car, multiple similar vehicles over a huge geography, and we know that the car is not going to be found for 14 years, which was a major controversy. Then we have the forensic technology. DNA testing was really unavailable for years, and so key evidence was shelved until the 2002 breakthrough. Then we have interagency work, manual and paper systems, poor cross-referencing between state and federal agencies, and so search efforts were hampered, communication was slow. And then the community role relied on family volunteers, and everybody was frustrated with police. And community trust and confidence in law enforcement definitely waned in this case. What did you find out?
So it says it's impossible to know the exact number of murders in which an entire car was buried because there's no official database that tracks such specific information with crime. However, the top three that pop up. Want to guess who the first one is?
Dwayne Eaton.
It is. The second one is the Iowa Cousins in 2020. And the third one is Atherton, California in 2022. An entire Mercedes-Benz was buried in the backyard of a mansion.
Huh. And I don't know. I'm not familiar with either one of those cases. Might have to research them now. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. There's no database that actually specifically cites that stuff.
Which doesn't surprise me, but you can usually get a pretty good idea of how common it is by just doing a search like that. And when, 5 pages of results come back, you know that it's a pretty common thing. And when there's 3, one of them being
the one we're talking
in Wyoming, it tells you it's very rare. And of course it's very rare. You know, it's hard enough. It's hard enough to dig a grave and bury a body without somebody seeing what's going on, but to bury a freaking car?
Yeah.
But like I say, it's only because it's Moneta, Wyoming. His neighbors saw him using a backhoe, but he told them, I'm digging in a septic tank. And they were probably like, oh, good. That creepy bastard's finally going to get his shit in a tank instead of taking a crap in a 5-gallon bucket.
Well,
so, I mean, when we get to talking about his quote-unquote house, the way that this man lived, there's animals that live in better conditions and keep themselves cleaner than this freaking pig. So, I did mention the autopsy a little bit in the beginning, but now we're going to go into detail in the autopsy findings. And so, trigger warning, again, just to let everybody know. So like I said earlier, the autopsy was conducted by the Natrona County coroner, James Thorpen, and it was It occurred on either April 2nd or April 3rd. It would have been just shortly after the body was discovered, and it happened in Casper, Wyoming. Obviously the cause of death her official cause of death was blood loss due to stab wounds. And she had also been struck in the head, which would have been fatal even if she hadn't bled to death. So she was hit hard enough that it would have killed her, but then she was stabbed soon enough after it that she died of exsanguination from the stabbing, but the head wound alone would have killed her within minutes. And then, speaking about the stab wounds, she had 6 stab wounds to her chest and her abdomen, all in her vital organs. And Sheriff Ron Ketchum initially stated that the manner in which she had been stabbed was a quote-unquote unique method, which he couldn't release for fear of corrupting the investigation. And FBI agents later suggested that the knife wounds, 5 in a pentagram pattern on the chest with a 6th under her sternum, indicating a possible cult connection, as they had seen in ritualistic murders before. There's no cultic connection to this case, but
I was about to ask you if he was culty or not. If he was trying to...
I think he's too dumb to be. He's just creepy. But no, there's no cultic connection at all. But
and you think he's too dumb to be blaming it on a cultic thing?
I think he's too dumb to practice the occult.
Okay.
I think he's too dumb to understand.
Gotcha.
But this is during the peak of the satanic panic of the late 80s and early 1990s. And so everything was occultic back then. So it doesn't surprise me. I don't know.
You sneeze 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. You're a witch. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if there is any significance. Nothing has ever come out to say that there was significance to the way that she was stabbed. I find it beyond interesting that all stab wounds hit a major organ. That's not easy to do without practice.
I feel like he might have known a little bit more than you want to believe he knew.
Oh, I believe he knew a lot. I think that he had already killed multiple women by this point. Okay. And so I have every reason to believe that he knew exactly where the vital organs would have been. Okay. I don't think that there was any ritualistic or occultic connection, but it doesn't surprise me at all that he knew exactly where to stab somebody to kill them. Because like I've said multiple times this season, I think he was guilty of, he's at least a very high candidate for me for the Elko County murders, which started in 1972. So we're talking a long time before Lisa, but I think by 1988, he had been killing for a while. Now, if you don't buy the Elko County connection, then he turned himself into police in 1982, saying that he was afraid he was going to do something bad and hurt somebody. So even if you don't believe that he was involved in the Elko murders, I do believe that he was very likely involved in, like Janelle Johnson, who we've already talked about. And, there were several murders which we've discussed in and around Moneta and Wyoming in 1982, 1983, right after he was afraid he was going to hurt somebody. Right. Some of those fit, some of those don't fit. But as I discussed in Janelle's episode, I think he's the most likely for Janelle's case. So
they just didn't take him seriously, or...
Oh, he was seen by some doctors and stuff. And, back in 1982, they diagnosed him with, and I'll be discussing it when we discuss him in more detail. It was one of those weird ass things that they don't use anymore. One of, like they used to describe mental illness as
hysteria,
and stuff like that. It wasn't hysteria, but it was something. It was a term that they don't use anymore, which was just kind of a catch-all. He's having a bad day kind of freaking thing, you know?
A bad day. Thank you very much.
But I mean, it really is how mental health was treated until pretty recently, really. It was just like, suck it up, put your big boy pants on, and stop acting like a baby. And so there wasn't a lot of help. And unfortunately, and you guys will hear me say this over and over and over and over and over again, unfortunately, we can't lock these people up when they say they're going to kill somebody, which defies reason to me, but whatever.
Because they're clearly asking for help.
Clearly. And they're clearly a danger to people. So, but anyway, back to the autopsy. She had been struck in the head with some kind of a blunt object, and then she had bruises and abrasions on her wrists, ankles, arms, and legs, consistent with being bound by nylon or hemp rope. And again, there was a noting of a lack of defensive wounds. Authorities assumed that she was unconscious when she was struck in the head and thrown into the water, which I'm sure she would have been rendered unconscious by the blow to the head. But I have to believe that there would have been a series of wounds from her 6 days in captivity. I find that hard to believe. And then, like I already alluded to, Lisa had been sexually assaulted. Male DNA was found on her genitals and on the underwear that she was wearing. The DNA was later matched to Delwayne Eaton. And while her body was discovered 8 days after her disappearance, the autopsy determined that she had been dead for maybe 36 hours before her discovery. And so this led investigators to believe that she could have been alive and held captive for as long as 7 days.
Well,
Her mother, Sheila, believed that her daughter died on March 31st, 6 days after she was last seen. And then the crime scene, a pool of blood matching Lisa's blood type. Again, this is before DNA, so blood type is what we had back then. But a pool of blood matching her DNA, her blood type was found on the old government bridge a quarter of a mile from where her body was found. But that definitely suggested that she was killed, or at least critically injured on the bridge and then thrown into the water. The fact that
she was unconscious.
the fact that water was not found in her lungs, or at least it was not noted in the autopsy, I believe that she was almost certainly dead before she hit the water, because there would have been even one breath would have left water in her lungs. And so with 6 stab wounds to major organs, she would have bled out almost instantly. So she had trauma to her genital region, injuries consistent with forced penetration, bruising and lacerations in the pelvic region with the seminal fluid, which was collected from the body. So the medical examiner determined that assaults occurred during her period of captivity, multiple instances over several days. So the time of death couldn't be determined to the day. So it was estimated to be between March 31st and April 1st. And that was based on the condition of the body, minimal decomposition, stomach contents, rigor mortis analysis. And we know that she was last seen on March 25th. There's no possible way that she could have been killed on that day just because of the condition of the body. And then, like I said, toxicology report came back clean. No drugs or alcohol were reported in her system. They were definitely not a factor in her death. Ligature marks indicated prolonged binding consistent with captivity in some isolated location. Yes.
What's the half-life, though? Could he have drugged her to subdue her when he took her?
Absolutely could have.
And that would have been gone by then?
Almost all of them. Almost all drugs would have been gone by 7 days. Yeah.
That would explain less wounds. Help.
So yeah, less wounds during captivity.
Yeah, well, less
defensive wounds.
Thank you. Like it's there.
Yeah, potentially. There's no indication that he drugged her. I don't believe that he did. I don't think he was smart enough to do some shit like that. Honestly.
Really?
No.
Okay.
I think that he grabbed her. He would later tell stories, which we'll talk about in later episodes, of what happened. I don't know that we can believe what he says, but he did say that she picked him up hitchhiking. Me and a lot of the investigators believe that she was very likely taken from the rest area that's right by Manita. And if you've ever driven between Casper and Shoshone, Wyoming, it's the only rest area on that road.
Yeah.
And so, she left Denver. She was, trucking it home. She got pulled over, which slowed her down a little bit. And
to see the boyfriend excited to.
Yeah, and so maybe she didn't stop in Casper, but then by the time she got there, she really needed to pee, so she pulled over at the rest station. And then there are people too that just hit rest areas and not gas stations because it's faster. You just literally can run in. There's usually multiple stalls. You don't have to wait in line.
Yep.
You can get in there, use the bathroom, and get on the road. And I can't confirm this, but the fact that she had traveled that road so many times with her mom, that might have been kind of the routine. We always stop at this rest area and use the bathroom.
So it's just force of habit. That's what she does.
Exactly. Yep. And, when there's two of you, there's a lot less to worry about than if you're by yourself. And so, and honestly...
But she would have thought, we've done this a million times. We've been fine. I'll be fine.
Yeah. And honestly, even... Obviously, I was 11 in 1988, but even when I was a young kid, just driving 16, 17 years old, I never feared stopping at a rest area in Wyoming. I never feared anything in freaking Wyoming.
I did, but we've established that I'm weird.
Well, and I know that there's a difference between a guy and a girl and all that kind of stuff, but I would say that even girls in Wyoming, while you might have been growing up, being told you need to be cautious, you need to be aware and all this kind of stuff. It was something that happened somewhere else. It wasn't something that happened in Wyoming. It was very much not something that happened in Wyoming. Now, going back and reading and learning about the freaking rash of murders that were going on in the 80s, it's insane, but that shit was not talked about. I had no clue. And I recently was
fully unaware.
Yeah. And recently I was talking to my parents about this, and I was like, did you have any idea that, we had these 4 people that were murdered in Rawlins, Wyoming in 74. We had all these women that were disappearing and being found murdered through the 80s all across Wyoming. And they were like, no, they think they can remember hearing about the Rollins thing somewhat, but they didn't hear about all of this.
Yes, your mom was like, too much. You need to stop.
No, she's very supportive, but yeah, they had no memory of it whatsoever either. And I don't think that anybody did, but you really put yourself back in there. In that time period, like I've said before, growing up where we did, I had very limited access to TV. The only stations that I could get back in that time were from Billings. Well, Billings didn't really report a lot of at least central Wyoming news. Sometimes they would pick up some of the news in the northwestern part of the Wyoming, but they weren't really reporting on what was going on there. That would have been Casper, and we didn't get Casper channels up here. And I would say a vast majority of Wyoming didn't get Casper news. And so it's just the reality, and it's still that way, quite frankly. But we do have, we have the internet now. So it makes it possible to get a lot of information. But back then, it would have literally just been newspapers or the 5 o'clock news. And unfortunately for us, it was Montana news. So we just did not get this information at all. I had no clue. And so I don't think I'm unique, that I think the vast majority of Wyoming really felt it was a very, very safe place. And it was a very safe place. In comparison, there's very, very, very low crime. But I can see.
And we'd like to keep it that.
Damn right we would. But I can easily see a young girl having no fear stopping at night at that rest area in Manita. You know, I haven't set foot in that rest area since 1988, for the record. I still refuse to go to that rest area.
I can't guarantee that I have not.
I will hold it until I get to Casper, Shoshone. I will not go to that rest area. I don't know. It's just something in my brain broke in 1988. And
Said no.
Yes. And I won't stop there.
Keep reverence for that place.
Yep. And it's funny because we don't know for sure, but you know, for all of those years, from the time that we figured out what happened to her, it happened at that rest area for years and years and years and years until it came out that he had another story. But I still think that the vast majority of people, including me, believe that she was taken from that rest area. In 1988, forensics had boundaries. DNA testing existed, but it wasn't fast. It wasn't widespread, and it wasn't enough. There were no national databases, no real-time sharing of results, and for Lisa's case, that meant delays and too many. What investigators had was trauma, evidence of sexual assault, bruising, bite marks, but no clear fingerprints, no clear suspect. What they did have was her car, or rather, what they didn't. The black Honda CRX was still missing, but everyone remembered the plate, Lil Miss. 7 letters that told you something about who Lisa was. Proud, kind, unapologetically herself. But to the public, and later the press, those letters became something else. A symbol of innocence stolen, a headline shorthand for the cruelty that she endured, and eventually, a key to catching the man who took her. But back in 1988, Lil Miss was just a missing plate on a missing car, and the science wasn't ready for what came next. Talking just a little bit about the forensic limitations in 1988, you know, forensic science in the late 1980s relied heavily on the traditional methods like fingerprinting, ballistics, blood typing, the ABO blood typing system, and basic serology. Limited by technology, resources, and knowledge compared to modern standards. So at this period of time, we're still pretty much in the same place they were in 1960. I mean, there were small advancements, but nothing major. And, you know, DNA, like I said, it was whispered about, it was talked about, but it was invented invented really isn't the right word when you're talking about DNA. It was discovered by Alec Jeffries in 1984. And it wasn't like discovered then. It had been discovered earlier, but, you know, it had kind of worked its way to a place where they've decided that this was something that we could use. And that was in 1984. So that was only 4 years before.
It was still an infant at the time.
Yes. I mean, the first case that it was used in was in 1986, only 2 years before Lisa's murder. And that was the pitchfork case in England. It was introduced to the U.S. courts in 87-88, with the first conviction of Tommy Lee Andrews in Florida happening in November of 1988. So, you know, that's just an idea of, it was a baby, like you said, during this time. Now, before the era of crime dramas and rapid DNA matches, the reality of forensic science in '88 was way slower. And you alluded to this a little bit ago. Back then, if investigators collected semen or blood, they were stuck with a method that was called RFLP, which is restriction fragment length polymorphism. It was the only DNA test that was available back then, and it needed very large and very pristine samples that hadn't been degraded in water or in heat. And the process itself, like you said, could take weeks, months, and there were only a handful of very specialized labs in like the whole world that were doing it,
and trusted people.
Right. And it was even a smaller percentage of those labs were available to law enforcement in the United States. I mean, it was a very niche thing during this period of time, very expensive. And compare that to today's PCR testing, which is polymerase chain reaction, which can take a tiny bit and then copy it. Even the thinnest, most damaged fragments of DNA can be essentially reconstructed and copied until there's enough of it that can be tested. And it produces results in days or even in hours. But in Lisa's case, the evidence, thank God, was just carefully preserved, but the DNA technology just was not ready for it yet. And so that's why for over a decade, the answers stayed locked away in an evidence freezer until science finally caught up.
Yeah.
And so to understand the investigation's hurdles, imagine a detective's day in rural Wyoming in 1988. There was no luminol spray to reveal hidden blood stains, just a flashlight and a keen eye. Fingerprint searches.
Flashlight.
Right. Fingerprint searches meant shuffling through paper files because there weren't national databases. Crime scene photos. Everything in '88 was shot on film with no real way to zoom in on a suspect's jacket and a computer later like we can do now. We couldn't
magnifying glass
increase the pixels and, we couldn't do all that. Like you say, we had a magnifying glass. That was it. Or like those freaking machines that my grandma had one because she had macular degeneration and so she couldn't read. So it looked like a microfiche machine, except it was for like pictures and stuff, and it would blow them up. It was like that kind of shit, And even simple evidence like carpet fibers and hairs were analyzed under a microscope. There was no fancy DNA to tell you who they belonged to. With every piece of evidence, they had to hope that nothing was lost in the shuffle. The chain of custody forms, physical keys to locked rooms, handwritten logs. The smallest mistake could mean evidence was gone forever. And for the Kimmell case, one misstep could erase the only hope for answers.
Because now they can take a string and tell you which batch of hoodies was made for this JCPenney's in what city and town and match it. And I find it insane that they can do that. This one string was in this batch of.
It's crazy because you're recalling a case. A little girl was kidnapped from a church. I can't remember the name.
Case, there's several.
No, but there's one in particular that you made me think of because a little girl was kidnapped from a church and then was found murdered tragically, and she was wearing, I believe it was like a Muppets outfit. It was like a little black and plaid, like a little plaid, black and red plaid skirt and like a black top with like Big Bird or something on it. And investigators went to the JCPenney catalog, which if you're a kid from the 80s,
JCPenney out of the air.
It was the wish book. You got every freaking Christmas, most exciting thing ever. And
sit with that magazine and a marker for hours.
He sat down with the JCPenney wish book and he found that outfit and he wrote JCPenney's and they sent him the outfit and they had used a particular dye for, I think it was Big Bird, and it was the yellow in like his beak or some shit, which was trademarked to whoever it was. And it was the only place that was ever used. And ironically, that little outfit they only sold like so many, and then they didn't produce anymore, and so they were able to solve the case based on that complete rabbit trail that we went off on. But to your point, you're exactly right. It's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Sorry, I derailed you.
Oh, no, you're fine. So we just got to talk a little bit about that iconic Little Miss license plate, which, we've talked about quite a bit. We talked about in the first episode that was the nickname that was bestowed by her grandma at birth. And so she had carried that nickname from July 18th, 1969. And so this was as much her name as anything else, and it was an affectionate term used by her family, and she embraced it. And then after she graduated from Billings Senior High in 1987, she got that personalized license plate, and it was kind of a symbol of independence and her personal identity as she made this big move to Colorado for work and everything. And then, obviously, exactly. Yep. And then obviously, this plate made the vehicle way more distinctive. I mean, it should be very easy to identify this vehicle if it still has that plate on it. But there were numerous reports of Little Miss plate across U.S. and Canada. All of them were false leads. For the most part, there were a few people that had called in and said that they had seen her before the speeding ticket, or, like in Casper, just shortly after. There were some that seemed like they were viable reports, but the vast majority of them, the vast majority of them were false.
Like Canada, not so much.
No possibility. And at the time, we didn't know. They didn't know that. Was the killer from freaking Calgary? Did he murder her and then take her car to Canada?
Yeah.
It was possible because the car was gone. Mm-hmm. It could have been anywhere. But that Lil Miss really became the icon of the tragedy. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, I really think that there was a sensationalist aspect to the media coverage with that plate, because clear as anything in my mind, I can still see, the little box behind the news anchors. I could still see the Montana plate reading Lil Miss. I mean, it was
above their head.
Yes, it was everywhere. And then it has become iconic in true crime lore. It was featured in Unsolved Mysteries in 1989, and it's symbolized unsolved cases up until the 2002 resolution. Her case really was brought out over and over and over again when talking about these unsolved mysteries, unsolved murders, for that entire period of time. And it kind of went away once her case became solved. But before 2002, her case was really symbolic nationally for, unsolved disappearances, unsolved murders, that kind of stuff,
For reasons I can't figure out, all of a sudden my brain wonder if Montana would let somebody get that license plate ever again.
I would hope not.
It just makes me wonder if it's flagged as
it very well might be
honorable,
because they do have safeguards in place, so you can't get naughty words and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
you have to explain what your words mean, because I have prestige plates and I have to explain them.
Yeah, and I think that I've heard stories of people trying to get Hail Hitler or whatever bullshit that, and they absolutely won't allow that kind of nonsense. Yeah. So I would hope that it would be just permanently retired, kind of like you do with football players when they retire. You retire their number. I would seriously hope, because I question any son of a bitch that would actually get that license plate. That would be
but later on, if somebody who just didn't know,
right?
I mean, there's a small part of
as iconic
there.
as that plate is, I would suspect that they probably have it flagged. Now, other cases where there's a personalized license plate, probably not.
Yeah.
But, I think, my guess is, but I don't really know.
I don't know why it just came to me and I wondered out loud.
Sure. No, that's what this show's all about.
I do. I wonder out loud, and John looks at me like, I don't know.
And so then we've got to talk about the family's immediate response and then their lasting pain. So Sheila Kimmell has publicly described the lasting trauma of losing her daughter. And keep in mind, this poor family lost their son at like age 3, Lisa's brother, and now they've lost Lisa. Now, a tragic accident, while it's never easy to lose a child, a tragic accident, I would think, has got to be easier to take than a brutal murder.
If even just...
Well, you don't have the constant, what did she go through for those 7 days or whatever that she was held captive, But Sheila would say, quote, "You don't bury somebody and just be done with it. Life never goes away." And then when returning to the site of her daughter's murder on what would have been Lisa's 36th birthday, Sheila related, quote, "What did my daughter go through for 6 days that she was held here? I just can't imagine it. Horrors, just a horror story." End quote. No. The family's pain is stretched across decades. As Sheila stated during a sentencing hearing, quote, "Our pain has spanned the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks," end quote. And her other daughter, Sherry Ogdegaard, echoed the family's anguish, saying, quote, "The original sentence should have been upheld," end quote. And as we'll get to talking about all this in later episodes, but piece of shit was sentenced to death, and then he didn't get it. So Sheila has advocated for justice and highlighted the importance of not letting the system forget victims, saying to be re-victimized by the state after all this. And she said that during the resentencing hearing for piece of shit, expressing frustration that seeing Eaton by video rather than in person diminished her last chance at confrontation and closure. The Kimmells took a rare step in their fight for justice by successfully suing Dale Wayne Eaton and obtaining his property, symbolically burning down the site of Lisa's captivity to, quote, "be done with it, no more, never again."
Amen.
This episode's backstory details how Sheila tried to keep Lisa safe, proposing, she went over maps, she discussed the route with her. I mean, she did everything a mom could do. And I don't think she did anything wrong, and I don't think Lisa did anything wrong. I don't believe that Lisa picked him up hitchhiking. Like I said, I think she stopped at a rest area, which is what they're there for, and you should be able to safely use a rest area without having to worry about a piece of shit kidnapping and murdering you. So, Sheila Kimmell and her family's voices have been central to the emotional and public legacy of the Lisa Marie Kimmell case, offering powerful testimony about the lifelong toll that violent crime has on a family and the urgent need for both justice and reforms to support victims' families. And, I'm a huge advocate for this, and it's something that I'll say today, and I'll say it over and over and over again. And that is, I love our justice system. I really do. I love that you're presumed innocent until you're found guilty. I love that you're judged by a jury of your peers. I love that the system is really set up to, if there's even the remotest of chance, and I realize it's not perfect, and I realize it happens, but even if there's the remotest of chance that an innocent person would be found guilty. We would rather let the guilty free than, punish an innocent person. And I love the way our justice system is set up. I really believe in it. And I really believe that it is probably the best system that could be devised by man. I really do. Where I run into a huge problem is what happens after conviction. And I think that's one space where we need a hell of a lot of work, because what we do is re-victimize families over and over and over. We find the piece of shit guilty. We've proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it, she did it, whatever. And then the appeals start. And then the family has to go back. And the family has to go back. And then the parole eligibility starts. And the family has to show up at parole here. This literally damns.
And cry and plead and yeah.
This damns the family to a lifetime of re-victimization over and over and over again. And I think we've got to come, in my opinion, is that we've got to come to a place in this country where 30 years in prison means 30 years in prison. Life in prison means that your ass dies behind those stone walls. And the death penalty means you die.
Good behavior bullshit.
No, you don't lessen a life sentence by good behavior. If you're sentenced to life, you die there. That's what life in prison means. And if we can't stomach life in prison as a society, then we shouldn't dole it out. But it's insane to me that you can be sentenced to life in prison and then walk after 25 years. I think it's absurd. I think it's wrong. And I think that it prioritizes the perpetrator over the victims' families. And so there's that.
And or the victim if they're still alive.
Exactly. I was 11, just a kid, old enough to understand words like missing and murdered, but too young to know what to do with them. Lisa wasn't a stranger on TV. She looked like the girls in my sister's class. She was damn near in my sister's class. Graduated a year earlier. She could have been in our driveway waving goodbye on that Friday afternoon. When Lisa's story broke, it broke something in me too. I remember the photos, the press conferences, the way adults whispered when they thought we couldn't hear. But we heard and we saw. And for the first time, I knew what fear looked like when it lived inside of people that you loved. It was in the way my mom double-checked the locks, the way my dad got quiet when the news came on, the way every girl in town suddenly had to call the second they got where they were going. This wasn't a faraway crime. It was ours. It belonged to us because Lisa was us. The media couldn't stop talking about it, and neither could we. But behind the noise was something darker, a realization that the world wasn't as safe as we thought it was. Not even here. Not even for someone like Lisa. We got to talk a little bit about the media coverage of this case because it absolutely exploded. And that began March 26th. After her boyfriend, Ed Jarosh, and the family reported her missing. So the Billings Gazette in Montana, the Casper Star Tribune in Wyoming published the first reports and described Lisa as an 18-year-old from Billings driving to Cody and then home to Billings, highlighted distinctive Little Miss license plates on the black Honda CRX. She was described as being 5'3", 110 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, last sighting at the Douglas speeding ticket, planned Easter visit in Billings. And they appealed for any information, especially along that I-25 route and then on into Cody. Her parents, Ron and Sheila, were interviewed. They distributed flyers. The media was used to solicit public tips on the vehicle or on Lisa. And the scope was this area, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado. Radio and TV bulletins in Denver and Casper and in Billings focused on a possible accident maybe, or a breakdown initially. And then April 2nd, after her body was found, the immediate report were the Casper Star-Tribune, which headlined the discovery and described a fisherman spotting a partially nude body, quickly identified as the missing Lisa Kimmell. And then there was the sensational elements that were revealed, the brutal details from the autopsy, the beating, the stabbing, the sexual assault. And like I've said over and over, this was dubbed the Little Miss murder, linking it to the plate and the photos of the car. And photos of the car and Lisa were all over the place. And then the National Wire Service picked it up, the AP, UPI, and it appeared in major papers like the New York Times briefly. TV news in the Rocky Mountain region covered it extensively. The family were interviewed all over the place, statements of grief, Coroner James Thornton on the injuries, law enforcement on the investigation and the investigative challenges, no car being found, the conflicting witness reports. And then, like I said, Unsolved Mysteries aired an episode like the next year on March 1st, 1989. That was season 1, episode 17, which detailed the disappearance, the finding of the body, the crime scene, the reenactment of the drive and the abduction, and then showed composites of suspects from different sightings. So her story was viewed by millions, and it generated hundreds of tips nationwide, highlighted the unsolved status and the captive theory. And then in other national media, it was featured in true crime magazines with occasional updates on anniversaries. The FBI involvement was noted in the reports. And then the case has been profiled in books, documentaries. Sheila, her mom's 2005 book called The Murder of Little Miss, which reignited interest. And, it really detailed the family's perspective.
I should know the answer to this, but you read it, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. I listened to it on Audible, but, so, the Little Miss murder, quote unquote, was coined by the media after her discovery. And it obviously ties to that license plate. And it was used, like I said, in headlines all over the freaking place and on the TV. And then the Little Miss killer was what was dubbed for her unknown killer for years, and, in like all of the media frenzy focused on, the graphic details, the sensational aspects of the crime, but reporters swarmed Casper and Billings. There were press conferences by the Natrona County Sheriff's Office, debates on highway safety for young women, and then, because this case remained unsolved from 1988 to 2002, we had all of the annual updates, which, every anniversary, this happens with solved cases, but with unsolved cases, it's really more poignant and a lot more common, where you have annual updates in local papers, cold case features like the 10th anniversary specials, which revisit the evidence. And then we'll be talking about the breakthroughs and everything that would be coming. But the public during this period of time in Wyoming and in Montana, women feared driving alone on rural highways like I-25 and like Highway 26. And we had all kinds of, the people, women and girls were taking self-defense classes and getting into karate classes and stuff during this period of time. Casper residents avoided the old government bridge area. Rumors of a local killer heightened that paranoia. Parents restricted their teens traveling. And then across the Rocky Mountains, awareness of abduction risks, media amplified with stranger danger narratives. This is during that whole period of time. And like I've said multiple times throughout this, there were over 300 sightings reported. The car with the plate was seen in distant locations. Almost all of those were false, but it indicated public vigilance and fear-induced misidentifications. And then the family described constant dread, public sympathy mixed with morbid curiosity, and the Unsolved Mysteries episode scared viewers. I can attest to that 100%. Right. But it did prompt safety discussions. And then, during this period of time, the Wyoming Highway Patrol increased their patrols on these roads, on these interstates, in these stretches. And there was an advocacy for better lighting, emergency phones, which is pretty unreasonable across a lot of this, but people were trying to get something to happen to make this safer. And it really did symbolize the vulnerability of young women travelers and inspired cautionary tales that are probably still told to this day, and then her mom's book really emphasized the resilience amid all of the fear. And then there was obviously a heightened awareness, which then led to the DNA database. I mean, Lisa's case, it's not, you can't say that because of her case we have DNA databases and stuff, but it was one of the cases that contributed to a lot of these changes, because there were multiple cases like Lisa's, and this
stepping stones.
Yes, and this idea that, okay, now we have this technology, and if we can get DNA from shitheads, scumbags that we know are scumbags, we could maybe see if they had done shit before. And Lisa's is one of the earliest cases where that was used successfully, which we'll be talking about in later episodes. So do you have anything to add or questions or anything before we close out this episode?
I always jump in when they
You do? Yep.
I don't really just hold on to them. Wait.
Well, that's good. That's the way it should be. So, when Lisa's body was pulled from the North Platte, a question changed. No longer, where is she, but what was done to her? And more hauntingly, by whom? The discovery confirmed the worst fears of everyone who knew her. She hadn't run, she hadn't disappeared. She had been taken, held, assaulted, killed. Her body told part of the story. The autopsy revealed more, but even in death, Lisa wasn't allowed dignity. Her car was still gone, her clothes gone, her final days still a blank space no one could fill. And yet, one thing remained. Her name, her plate, Lil Miss. Those 7 letters, once playful, personal, became a symbol of defiance because they were unforgettable. And one day, they would come back to haunt the man who tried to erase her. In the days following her discovery, fear settled like fog across Wyoming. Not the panic of headlines, but the quiet, paralyzing kind that keeps doors locked and curfews early. Everyone felt it, especially the girls, because Lisa hadn't done anything wrong. She was just driving home. There were no arrests, no suspects, no justice. Not yet. Next time, we'll follow the trail of Lisa's missing car, the years that it spent off the radar, and how a single match, long after the trail had gone cold, changed everything. Because killers leave traces, even when the science takes years to catch up. She had a laugh that lingered, one of those rare sounds that made you pause, even in another room, because it wasn't just joy, it was full of life. Lisa Marie Kimmell didn't enter a space quietly, not because she was loud, but because she was present. She looked you in the eye, she listened, she remembered. Her coworkers at Arby's talked about how she moved through a shift, like it mattered, like even the small stuff deserved care. And her friends, they still remember the way that she made everyone feel like they belonged, like they were enough. She was the kind of daughter who called, not out of obligation, but out of love. The kind of person who brought people together without realizing that she was doing it. Lisa had dreams. She wanted life, independence, a life that fit the size of her spirit. She didn't want fame. She just wanted to build. And what was taken from her wasn't just a future. It was the ripple effect, all of the lives that she would have touched, the people that she would have helped, the quiet good that she would have done in this world. We remember Lisa not for the way that she died, but for the way that she showed up in life. Bright, kind, present, and unforgettable. Lisa's discovery gave her family answers, but it didn't give them peace because knowing what happened isn't the same as knowing who did it.
1988, limited forensics, and no witnesses, the case began to cool. But Lisa's story didn't fade. It echoed. In the headlines, in the silence, in the fear that spread from one small town to the next.
Next time, we'll follow the next chapter in this case, how one missing piece of evidence finally surfaced and how a killer's arrogance would start to unravel.
If Lisa's stories moved you, please keep it alive. Help us keep it alive. Like, follow, give us a thumbs up, and share this episode with someone you trust. It makes more of a difference than you might realize.
You can also support our investigations directly by joining us on Patreon or give a one-time gift at coffee.com. Your support funds open records requests, travel, research, everything that it takes to tell these stories right.
Subscribe to our Substack for transcripts, case files, and behind-the-scenes work.
And if you want to be part of the community, we're on Discord. It's where the conversations continue, thoughtfully, respectfully, and always with the victim at the center. We also have the Adopt a Victim program and the Dark Dialogue Collective.
As always, you can reach us at any time at info@darkdialogue.com. We read everything and we answer when we can.
This has been Dark Dialogue Rocky Mountain Reckoning. I'm John.
And I'm Angela.
We'll see you next time when a car resurfaces and the story sharpens. Until then, make the guilty face the reckoning.